Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Z. I'm a clinical psychologist specializing in transgender care. Welcome to my channel. Today, I wanted to discuss with you the overwhelming cost, both financially and emotionally, of gender transition. And I want to offer you a perspective on how to look at that cost from a different angle in order to help you overcome some of the barriers you may be some of the barriers that may be created as obstacles as a result of looking at this cost. A lot of times when we look at gender transition, and for a lot of you who are adults looking at gender transition from very realistic, very pragmatic, very life-lived perspective, you understand how overwhelmingly costly gender transition can be, not only financially but also emotionally. And we consider all of the costs. A lot of times that consideration of the cost can make people stop from actually going through gender transition because the fear of the cost and the fear of the debt that a person is going to incur tends to really terrify you. So I want to share a different perspective to look at the debt in order to help you overcome that fear. So let's for starters talk about cost of gender transition. As a lot of you know, in the United States, just financial, let's look at financial side first. Financial cost of gender transition can be very, very expensive. I know that insurances are getting better at picking up and covering transgender care, but we all also know that even though you may have transgender coverage in your insurance, there's also things such as in-network, out-of-network, which can change a lot of things for you. In addition to that, there's also deductible and out-of-pocket maximum that a person has to reach before the coverage kicks in. So those things in insurance policies can make it very challenging to get affordable care. Forget the term affordable, to get care at all. So as a result, financial cost of gender transition is going to add up, especially if one is considering surgical interventions and wants to go to some of the top and some of the most skilled and best surgeons. Oftentimes, the surgeons will not take insurance. If they do take insurance, the coverage is still going to be limited. I'm not telling you all of this to scare you from transitioning, but I'm just outlining some of the realities in case if some of my younger adult audiences are watching, they're also aware of this reality and considers that and factors that into their gender transition. On top of financial cost, there's also an emotional cost associated with gender transition, right? And some of the emotional cost aspects of gender transition could be potentially fear of separation from your partner in a relationship if you are in a relationship, potential fears that your family will not want to stay close to you or support you, potential fears that your friends are also not going to be there to support you. So there's all of these fears emotionally that people close to you are going to leave you and that ultimately you're going to be pretty much alone. Now, a lot of times I gotta say those fears are not as catastrophizing and out of proportion as we tend to make them out to be, but they do happen for some people and they don't happen for others. Nonetheless, as you can see, the cost of gender transition, both financially and emotionally, can rank up. And when a person decides to go through gender transition and to look at the cost, both financially and emotionally, one of the things that people tend to think about is, well, if financially I'm not equipped to cover everything that I need to cover, let's say you're not in financial position where you can cover the surgeries you want. Generally speaking, for the services I'm trying to summarize what I tend to see the cost of gender transition is. And it's hard to do because it really varies on what kind of surgical intervention a person needs to have. But it can, and oftentimes does, goes above $100,000 in costs and expenses just for the surgical transition alone. So it can be really, really expensive. And a lot of times people just don't have that money sitting around to spend on surgical transition. And a lot of times people start thinking about taking out a loan, start thinking about maybe putting things on their credit cards, which I totally understand. And then a lot of times, given today's current state of affairs, today's financial climate, also today's state of pandemic that we just been through, putting things on credit card incurs debt, and that idea of debt can really be terrifying. The same thing, there's also an idea of incurring emotional debt in the sense of really experiencing some losses when you're not ready to sustain or you don't have additional support to go through those potential losses right now. So constantly you're going to be struggling with this concept of debt, both financial and emotional debt. And I want you to gain a different perspective on debt. Now, before I share this perspective, in no way am I advocating for you to get into debt, nor am I advocating for you to be financially irresponsible. But sometimes I think forget to look at accumulation of debt from this type of financial perspective. So here's the thing, guys. There's two types of debt. One type of debt, and I learned this about in one of the financial books, and it helped me to take on debt going through the graduate school, which is, if I tell you how much my credit loans are, you'll be shocked. But it helped me to take those on without fear. And I had a fear about taking on those steps because I did not want to continue to be in debt majority of my life trying to pay off those student loans, which is what I'm trying to do right now. But here's the way that I started considering debt after reading particular financial books. There's two types of debt. One type of debt is a debt that you incur that tends to sink you even lower into debt. An example of that type, I would call it a bad type of debt. An example of a bad type of debt is a debt when we continue to live beyond our means and purchase things that we genuinely don't need, especially purchasing things or purchasing a lifestyle around ourselves that doesn't has a progressive betterment embedded in it. An example of bad debt would be, for example, buying a brand new TV because there's a new model on the market when you already have a very well-functioning TV. You are getting yourself into more financial debt by putting that new TV on a credit card and then having to work that much harder to pay off the debt. And this new TV, other than bringing you temporary pleasure, is not really making you any money. Bad debt is any debt you got yourself into that is not going to eventually make you any money. Once you buy that expensive TV, it depreciates quickly, and as a result, even if you try to sell it, you will never be able to sell it for what you purchased it for. That's an example of bad debt. Buying a new purse you don't need. Dining in expensive restaurants when you can go to cheaper places. All of the things that may make you feel good in a moment, they're not going to necessarily give you or bring you any income, bring you in a long run any kind of money. That is a version of bad debt. And I know that a lot of us are engaged in bad debt all of the time because socially we're inundated with this idea of materialism and all of those things. So I think a lot of us in the beginning especially do that until we learn not to lose it, hopefully, ideally. So that's a bad debt. That's a debt that sinks you further in the ground. You know, this concept of competing with the Joneses, buying the house so that you can stand out in the neighborhood, getting a newer car when your car is perfectly fine to drive. That's a bad debt. A good debt, on the other hand, is a debt that you invest in, that you incur debt as a result of, but in the long run, it's going to generate you money. My degree isn't a perfect example of a good debt. I invested money in it that I'm still paying off, but as a result of having higher degree, I'm able to do that much more, and I'm able to charge a higher rate because there's a difference between clinical psychologist and just a mental health therapist who has a master's level degree. So this is an example of a good debt. Another example of a good debt could be investing in property, investing in maybe buying a house. You're still paying mortgage on that house, but you're paying it toward eventually owning that property. That's a good debt. I hope you see the differences, and I know that a lot of you watching this know this difference. Gender transition, in my opinion, falls into good debt. You are investing money and you're also investing emotional debt in order to later not only be healthier and feel better about yourself, combat and ideally get rid of or alleviate, in the very least, gender dysphoria, be more authentic self, be more congruent. As a result of all of this and so many other things that I haven't even mentioned, you're going to be, trust me, you're going to be better off at productivity, working, focusing on your work. You're going to be more energized. You're going to be more confident. You're going to feel better about yourself. As a result, you're actually going to be more productive in your life. And chances are you're going to be more successful in your life. So as you can see, this is a debt that's actually ultimately going to continue to benefit your life for the better versus for the worse. Another thing to consider about gender-related costs, especially when it comes to surgical interventions, it's one of those steps that once you do have a surgery, right, it's done, it's completed. In other words, gender transition is not an ongoing incurment of debt. The only incurment that people tend to get are periodic doctor visits and periodic also expenses toward hormone regimen, which by far and large is covered by insurance. But your surgeries are going to be done and over with, and you're going to move on and live your life. So I want you to start noticing how there's a difference between a good debt and a bad debt. Sometimes we engage in bad debt, all the while wanting to go through gender transition and being upset that we don't have enough finances for gender transition. And we're not realizing that, we're not realizing that engaging in a bad debt, if we just stop, we just may end up saving up enough money to start gender transition. So this is a perspective I want you to think about. Good debt versus bad debt. What kind of debt are you engaged in? And yes, transition is without a doubt expensive, both financially and emotionally. But it's a type of debt that accumulates positive interest and positive things in your life for you. So I want you to think about it in that way and see how that can help you, that perspective can help you with moving forward with your gender transition. Comment below, let me know how many of you are worried about accumulating debt. Has this perspective shift how you look at the debt? How many of you have accumulated debt over here and as a result can attest to being that much more happier because this continues to also help you and continues to also bring things in your life that are positive versus negative? Comment below, let me know, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.